This is the Welcome to Humanity podcast with thought leader and transformative psychiatrist, Dr. Fred Moss. This show focuses on the betterment of humanity on a global scale. Each episode will leave you enlightened, inspired, and ready to make an impact in your world. Welcome to the show. Welcome to your life. Welcome to humanity. Here's Dr. Fred.
Welcome to my Welcome to Humanity listeners. So today I am again honored and just privileged to be with my guest. My guest is someone who we've run into each other over the last several years in various growth and development courses that we both have taken together. And maybe we haven't really learned about who each other was quite as much as I've been looking forward to. So one of the gifts that I have as now being someone who does podcasts is I get to pick and choose the people that I want to meet a little bit more. And this woman has been on the short list for that for a few years. And now today I get to share Rita Williams with you. Rita is a friend, a colleague, and just a fellow human being, trying to figure out what to do with the next step on this third rock from the sun. So welcome, Rita Williams. It's just great to have you here today. Thanks for being here.
It's really great to be here. And I'm excited about being known and knowing you, Fred, and really just speaking whatever comes up that really forwards humanity.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what this whole podcast direction is. So you're in the right place at the right time. And it is something to be known and to be called on and to have, what you say matters enough so that other people really want to hear what it is that you have to say about things. It really is an honor. So thank you. So Rita, I'm going to go over a little bit of the condensed biography you provided for us, and then you can add to it, or just like confirm it, or even if you have to change anything, that would be fine. But here's what I have: I have that Rita Tucker Williams was born in Georgia, which of course is the home of some other very important people, Nobel Peace honorees, Dr. Martin Luther King and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and President Jimmy Carter. Rita is married, and her husband's name is Dr. Ray Williams Jr., and he is a dentist. And Rita is also the proud mother of 3 children. And one of her children, Blake, is also a friend of mine. And she's a manager at the law firm of Williams and Associates, PC. Rita is a cum laude graduate of Spelman College, and is a graduate of the University of Michigan, Go Blue, and a graduate of Emory University School of Law, Juris Doctorate. So again, Rita, welcome to the podcast.
I'm excited.
So as all of you know, I meet lots of really cool people up to really big things in the world. And in truth, each and every one of us are dealing with something, right? So no matter whether we're taking on the really, really big problems or the extra tiny ones, we still face challenges, internally and externally. As a psychiatrist, as a coach, as a studier of behavior for many years, I've worked with all kinds of people from all walks of life. I've worked with more people than I can count, dealing with more issues than you can imagine, of all sizes and shapes. Over time, I developed a number of ways to assist others in gaining a new sense of freedom and empowerment. So now I'm pulling back the curtain on one of these methodologies, and I'm publicly revealing the process and associated mindset that contributes to using this particular method with maximum effectiveness. So it's all laid out in my new book called Creative 8, Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression. You can pick this book up at Amazon.com in either Kindle or paperback format. But as a listener to the Welcome to Humanity podcast, I'd like to offer you a completely free copy in the audiobook version. Please just go to welcometohumanity.net/creative and download your free audiobook copy of Creative 8 today. I look forward to hearing about your Creative 8 breakthrough. Now, let's get back to our conversation with Rita Williams.
Welcome to humanity.
All right. Well, Rita, sometimes when I'm doing these things, it's unclear. I talk to people who are multidimensional, And I get to choose sort of like how to launch the conversation. And given some of the things I know about you, and given what you're up to in the world, that's actually a tricky kind of challenge for you. So I'm going to open the conversation with a wide open-ended question. And that is, Rita Williams, like, who are you? What matters to you? What are you here for on earth? Those kind of questions. And again, trickle it down to a manageable, go ahead and just take a bite out of that one and let's see what comes next.
Okay. So who is Rita Williams?
Exactly.
I think what I'd say who Rita Williams is someone who thinks that her life belongs to the community. I think that's how I would describe me, as someone who really has a commitment to the community and to all who exist in the community. I know that my mission, or what I care about, is that the world is a great place for all people. I actually have a mission that I created, and it is that in really creating a world of grace, justice, and power for all people. So most of what I care about is that we get that we are one people. And it's so funny because, not funny, but poignant and perfect that Representative John Lewis, who lived in Georgia, had this saying that really encapsulates what we'll talk about today. And he said that we are one people from one family, and we all live in the same house. And I smiled when you said on this third rock from the sun, because I never thought about the earth as being the third rock from the sun. And that is the house that we live in. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I think we'll talk about today. The other thing that comes up to me is a term that I heard recently in a growth and development class, maybe about a month ago. And one of the things that people talked about, someone said that we're planetary human beings. And I love that saying, because one of the things we'll talk about today certainly is the title, or the speaking of race as it relates to human beings and categorizing human beings, or racial hierarchy, all of that. That's something I want to talk about. But when the gentleman said we were planetary humans, right? I loved it. And I loved it because growing up in the South, basically in the 1960s and the late 50s, when I heard the term planetary humans, I thought that term is big enough to include me and everybody on this earth. And I thought, yeah, I love that. So that's who I am, somebody who loves to include all people and all things, nature, animals, all of it, because I think I am related, and I think we all are, in my opinion, related to the all of it.
Well, Rita, that's, it turns out that these days that's almost a controversial thing to say. And, it's a shocking world that we live in. And you're like, oh, Rita's one of those kind of people who actually believes that we're all one, or that the whole earth is one. It's so interesting that some conversations have been taking place that tend to splinter that one way or another. Well, maybe for good reason, but I'm just saying, it starts to be that being able to say that, and saying that with the conviction you just did, even somehow has a chance of being controversial, is shocking to me. Like you could say that and have people think that you missed the point or something. And so, I'm going to put a couple things back out there that you said, which we can speak about now, which is this idea that, all people are one, but not only all people, nature, animals, the planetary human beings, and everything that exists on this planet, the third rock from the sun, but also like this one people thing, and that life belongs to community. And, and then I think as we dig a little bit deeper, it's pretty clear that at least commenting or getting a conversation going about how race, what the issue of race and how that fits in and relates to what it means to be a human. Today's no better time to speak to this issue as well. So let's take this a little bit deeper and pick on a few of those and see if we can uncover or, peel the onion one more level in. What do you have to say about any of that?
I just say, yay, let's go.
All right. Well, let's talk then about, do you get what I'm saying? That if we say all people, one people, it's almost like these days that's represents a political slant all of a sudden, people have to be careful when they say something like all people matter, for instance, in the face of other sayings that are out there, including Black Lives Matter, or including, I've heard other people talk about whatever their particular affiliation, lives matter. And then you say something like all people matter, and it's not as understood in the same way as it might have been understood just a few years ago. Would you be willing to comment a little bit on that?
Yeah, I know that is controversial. And, again, and maybe because, what just happened with Representative Lewis, but the thing that he talked about and that I am picking up and speaking about today, and I didn't know it was going to go so much to him, is get in the way and cause good trouble. And not good, I don't know if things are good or bad, but I'm willing to say this is my point of view. And so let's go to, I think what you might want to, we can just start and go straight to is, I was thinking about the phrase that Black Lives Matter.
Okay.
And then we'll talk about that because that's going to be something that we talk about, racial classifications, I'm sure of that. And I was thinking why, I was just really thinking about it. And I thought perhaps because of the way certain groups, particularly African Americans, have been treated, if we can do a phrase that talks about equality for African Americans or people of color or Black people, Black Lives Matter, then maybe it's big enough to include everyone. Maybe that's why it's the core of the slogan and the chant, because if it's big enough to include that, it's big enough to include everyone, because Black lives do matter. They do. And this whole program is about that. And what has been done to splinter groups or to categorize or to basically use human beings as a taxonomy of this is a separate group. It's different. That maybe if we could talk about that some people may feel that African Americans in society today are and have felt were 3/5 of a human being, which if we bring the law into it, that was in the Dred Scott decision that was written in the United States Supreme Court. And that was the way people believed. They, many years ago, and some people still may believe that. So if it's big enough to include what maybe some people thought were not human beings, I think it's big enough to include everyone.
That's really great.
Yeah, we start right there, because if it can include what people call African Americans or Black lives, it can include everyone.
So I'm going to bring something to your attention here. And I think my listeners are probably already picked up on it, which is, this is like this inclusive thing. It's really fascinating, Rita, because so if we're going to say something like Black Lives Matter or Afro-American lives, or, if that can be said and really absolutely gotten to the core, then if it's big enough to get that, then we're big enough to get everyone. That's also like all people. The interface between that and what you said at the start of the show, when you spoke about when you heard someone say planetary human beings, that was large enough to include you too. On the very high level, the bookend is planetary human beings. And if it can include that, then it can include you and all of us, right? And on the other end, there's something like Black Lives Matter. And if it can include that, well, same thing. It can also then include all of us. It's like, it seems to me almost bookends.
And we will talk about that, because I think as we explore today, we'll talk about origins and a little bit, though I'm not a geneticist or an anthropologist. That's something I'm really interested in. And when we talk, I think at the end of this program, I think that there may be room for exploration of that term, of all terms, like all people or Black people or American people or planetary humans. There'll be room to explore all of that, I think, by the end of this podcast.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking a little bit at what another thing that you provided, for us before the show, which was your banner and your mission. Have you got those? I suppose you do, at your fingertips, and what your banner is and what your mission is. And can you share that with my listeners?
Yes. So in a class that I took about 11 years ago, I created a banner that I am really proud of. Or maybe it came through me. And what the banner is one race, the human race, no subtitles, please. Can I say it one more time?
Absolutely. You can definitely say it one more time.
So, I'm trying to think, when I was on a stage and I wrote that as my banner, and it is, again, one race, the human race. No subtitles, please. And for me, Fred, that is about justice, which, as people know, I am an attorney by trade. It's about justice for all people. That is about us having justice for everyone. Mm-hmm. And then you ask about my mission, and actually it's right in front of me. It is a world of grace, justice, and power for all people. Mm-hmm. And then, you want me to say anything about that?
Yeah, say it again. Please say that one again too, and generate it for all of us. It's phenomenal. Please.
It was created at the same time. So the mission that I represent and that millions represent is a world of grace, justice, and power for all people. And I remember being in this course, and one of the challenges was that whatever we created had to be big enough, again, that word, right, to include all 7 point whatever million or billion people on the planet.
Yeah.
And, getting into doing that, I kept wanting to make it smaller, but the only instruction was whatever we created had to be big enough to include all of the human beings or Homo sapiens on the planet. And it changed and transformed the way I thought of myself and the planetary humans and really what was possible for humanity. Mm-hmm. And here we are 10 years later in a time that it is just as important and just as relevant as it was 10 years ago.
Absolutely. I want to just reiterate what you mentioned here for my listeners. In another place of some of the documents that you provided, some of the information you provided about yourself. You did mention that your full name, including your formal title, is Attorney Rita Tucker Williams. And, it also turns out, and I didn't say this before, but we can gush you up a little bit here, is that you were selected as one of the top lawyers in America in 2019 by the Marquis Who's Who. And that's no small feat, Rita. That's like, and neither is the next one, which is a lifetime achievement award for your contribution to society and being featured in the Wall Street Journal as in November of last year, November 27th of 2019. So, how does this occur? Like, who is this woman with this banner and this mission? Like, really being that's the core. It's very clear that this is what you're here to bring forward. And how does that person work in our justice system in such a way as to be recognized for being, a top attorney and having a lifetime achievement award for your contribution to society? Like, what are some of the things that you can give credit to that have you be recognized at that level?
Well, there's a part of me that just says, who, me?
Right. Isn't that
And
great?
maybe
That's part of it, by the way, Rita. That's why I really believe you. I hear you. That's right. And that's part of what makes you so spectacular is the who me part of you just lives on. So please continue.
well, I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, and when I was born, it was a time of segregation, and there were my dad would say, make sure you sit in the back of the bus, don't cause any trouble, like that. That was when I was born, and my parents didn't go to college. They finished. My father finished high school. My mom did not. And I just remember that my sister was growing some vegetables, and she said, "Oh, come on, let's plant." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm not going to plant vegetables. I'm not going to be a maid." I just remember that, and I said, I'm not going to be a maid. I'm going to be a businesswoman." So I remember being 5, and I carried around a little drawer, and I had papers in it, and it was a drawer that was my briefcase. Really standing for justice even then. And, thinking I'll sit in the back of the bus, but that's not right. I didn't have the word justice then. And later, as an adult, I had friends who wanted to be lawyers, and they did not become lawyers. Many of them got taken out in the wave of drugs that came in the 1970s and 80s and 90s. But the thing is, I decided and chose that I would be a lawyer and speak for those who could not speak for themselves. And I would be a lawyer for those who were my friends, who could not achieve that. And so there was always this thing about justice, and justice for everybody. So I think when people see what I do, it's just, to me, it's just who I am. I mean, how would a justice system be fair for everyone? Everybody. And maybe that's an idealistic point of view, and maybe we never will achieve perfection, but it doesn't mean as humans that we can't be more just. We can't be more fair. And so I think that's what I stand for in everything I do. I certainly stand for excellence, and I work a lot of hours. My family, when I talk about belonging to the community, they share me with the community, but I stand for justice. That whole stand for justice for all people. And then, Fred, there's another part, the grace part. I can fight with an attorney, and we can sort of argue, and I can be an adversary. I can be adversarial. But at the end of the day, there is that people are really, really generally doing the best that they know how. So there's always room for growth and development and forgiveness and joy and love. And then that whole thinking that we want all people to be powerful. Because a lot of times we think, if I share power, I'll have less if I give you some.
Right.
But I would be of the opinion that the more power that each individual, or if you think there are individuals that each person has, the more power we all have, the more we can contribute and make a difference. So maybe that's why I was chosen. That's really all. I mean, I've done some great things in law in terms of appellate practice, where we've transformed the justice system in terms of adding a party, which is a part of civil procedure. But as I think about what people may see in me, is that whole mission, a world of grace, justice, and power for all people. And maybe it does seem to some people like a cliche, or perhaps that's nice, but for me, it's real. And it's something I strive for.
Well, that is, it is very clearly part of your greatness. And I don't want to keep hammering on that nail, but what makes it, as we talked about right before the show, what makes you extraordinary is sort of your acknowledgement that all you're really being is you. And you really just, all you are is really just committed to being exactly what matters to you. And in that and that alone, the world sees a great woman right there. and and then to actually move the needle forward in areas of life that matter not only to you but to the community at large. Lifetime Achievement Awards start showing up as just a function, as a natural correlate to who you are for the world around you. And you don't even have to notice, so that who me starts being like, of course you ask who me from where you're standing. And then the impact you're making on the world is getting noticed by us because we're not you. And we get to actually see what the impact of the world that Rita Williams is delivering each and every day. And we get to appreciate deeply you being one of us on the earth at this very time. So thank you for being here.
So happy to be here, Fred.
Yeah, it's really, really great. We talked a little bit, we talked about like John Lewis, and it seems like maybe it's time just the referencing his recent passing and what he represents to you, or what he represents to the community, or what he represents as a Georgian. I wonder if this is a good space for you to kind of dip in a little bit and tell us what your experience is with Mr. Lewis, and also with how he interfaced with your life.
Excellent. So, I see myself as a planetary citizen, right? But when I think about Representative Lewis, I think about the March on Washington, which I saw on television here in Atlanta. I think about Dr. Martin Luther King. I think about the I Have a Dream speech. I think about Representative Lewis. And I think my favorite saying is what I've already told you, that we are one people. And we come from one family. We all live in the same house. I'm like, how extraordinary.
Yep.
I mean, I think he said that in the 70s, but you can think it's a cliche, but what are the things that people remember? If we're spewing hate, do people remember that? Is that how we want to be remembered? Is that who we really are? But to think that he saw in the 70s, and Dr. King and others have stated, and Barack Obama, who was our president, have quoted him in the "We are one people, from one family, and we all live in the same house." And sometimes I think that gets overlooked. And I do want to talk a little bit about that and how I start exploring being one people, because that might be an interesting story. So I think of Representative Lewis as being this extraordinary world citizen who spoke love and power for all people. And he spoke truth that he saw to power, and he stood for the power of all people. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing about getting in trouble, because, a lot of times you're told, don't get in trouble. Be quiet, sit down, say what's acceptable, that it won't cause a controversy. It was, I smiled when you said that. And I don't think you asked me to be here today because you wanted me to be non-controversial, though I'm not trying to be controversial. I'm just here to share.
That's awesome. So here's what we have. I think, Rita, one of the things you just said, which I'm eager to pursue with you, is to explore what is Rita Williams really talking about when she says one people? And if you say it as an echo of John Lewis or Dr. King or other folks, Barack Obama, who have also referenced that same notion. There's what do you mean? And let's explore one more level in. What does one people really mean to you?
Oh, I love it. This is the moment I think I was born for. So thank you for having me. So when I was taking this class and I developed my mission and my vision, I realized today, I was thinking about it, that I had read an article in Newsweek that talked about mitochondrial DNA Eve. So one of my interests is absolutely anthropology. In undergrad, I was a psychology major, but I love anthropology and I'm very fascinated by people. So one of the things I wanted to bring to the scientific arena and look at what geneticists have talked about, at least since the 1950s, the whole issue of racial classifications is really a man-made construct, or a man-made thinking that is really not grounded in biology or genetics or science. It's something that we use to talk about socially that really came about in about the 1600s, when a lot of things people will know, if you know anything about 1619, was a time of colonialism. And when I look at it, I know that my great grandparents were on both sides of that issue, right? Because we're not just one thing, right? We're multifaceted. So mitochondrial DNA, Eve, is widely touted in most scientific arenas as the oldest common ancestor to all humans, or Homo sapiens. And when we look at DNA, which most people talk about, and we use it in science today, we can look at DNA that barely changes in millions of years. And we can go back to about 150 to 200 years ago and trace in an unbroken line through mothers and their mothers and those mothers until they converge on one woman. Some people call that lucky Eve, and some people will give it biblical significance. But today I'm basically talking about science. And basically, if we looked at that, and that was in the 1988 Newsweek, and the author was Tierney. So that research purported that all contemporary humans could be traced to a relatively recent African origin, and maybe even to a common mother. So then I look at that, and I remember being in my old office, seeing that, and I thought, oh, this is so fascinating.
It is. It really is.
And so all of this that we say, and it was in the 1600s or the late 1500s that all of the taxonomy of human beings came about. And it was then that at first we were saying different things, but it came out to 3 different races. And they were, I remember them, Mongoloid, Negroid, and Caucasoid. And basically Negroid being African or Black, and Caucasoid being what people term white, and Mongoloid being Asian. Well, then later, if you look at the today's census, I did some research, and you'll see that there have been 2 other categories added, and those are Hawaiian and Indian. And so looking at that and all that did, because it was basically, I would say, looking at what anthropologists have talked about, and we can talk about where you can read further about that if people want to know. It was used to categorize, to group or subgroup human beings. So then you go back on how I was affected by this article about mitochondrial DNA Eve, because in my banner it says, "One race, the human race," no subtitles, please.
Right.
So, it gets to that when you do a hierarchy, meaning that you place things on top of things. And, the issue with doing that is certain groups were considered, as we talked about, the 3/5 of a human being. And that was and that even today, that is still a part of our vernacular, is still a part of our conversation. And I just was thinking that, what was it like to be the person that dealt with the issue of people thinking that the world was flat? And how many years did it take to transform a conversation by science or a discussion that the world was actually round? And so now, I'm sure that wasn't always a thought, because there certainly were. When we think about Egypt, and we think about Egypt is in Africa, we think about the Great Pyramids, which I visited. You only have to go there and know that at least 5,000 and more years ago, this was done by humanity. And I do mean it in the broad sense. And those structures are still there. And so knowing that, and then knowing the connotations and the things that were done in the name of separate groups of human beings. And even today we have a census where there are 5 mandatory categorizations of human beings. So that's kind of what I wanted to bring up, and that whole oneness. And also I wanted to say one more thing, Fred. I wanted to tell people there's a great position paper that was done in 2019 of March by the American Association of Physical Anthropologists. And they state, and this is a quote, that race does not provide an accurate representation of human biological variance. It was never accurate in the past, and it remains inaccurate when referencing contemporary human beings. Humans are not divided biologically into distinct continental types or racial genetic clusters. And then it goes on to talk about colonialism, but that's certainly a starting point to look at. And not about rightness and wrongness.
Right.
But could we be open to a possibility there is another conversation that could be had?
So I love what you're saying about one people. And, to me, even though, I couldn't classify myself as a Afro-American, there's something like, oh, yes, I could. Absolutely, I could. I mean, if we have one mother, then I also come from her, and then we're all African Americans. Is that fair to say, or am I just being superficial about a really important topic here?
Oh, well, I mean, I think it's important, but I think we should play with it, right? So I don't know what people. I guess what we're exploring today is what is possible. And so what I would listen to you, and that's what we're really looking at, what is possible for humanity. So that's because what the scientists and what anthropologists, and you'll find in that article, is that humans share the vast majority of a common DNA, which is 99.9% the same. It's common. But we have these ways that we've been looking socially, that we've been educated, at least since the 1500s, when actually slavery was really taking hold, that we categorize people because it was important to do that, because it's very difficult if you don't see someone as an other, right? It's very difficult to do certain things. So that was then. But something else is possible now. So actually what the scientists say, Fred, when we look at mitochondrial DNA, Eve, is that if you look at, I mean, it gets really technical, but the long and short is we all come from the same mother. Like all human beings, we're of this L group or halogroup. And we all, as Homo sapiens, the Homo sapiens that are here today that are the contemporary, they went back tracing DNA. And this can be found. I mean, there's so much about it. And it traced back to basically Southern Africa, and it can be traced to one woman. Now, there are all kind of misconceptions that means there was only one woman, and it doesn't mean that. But that's the most common, recent, oldest ancestor that had the gene that was of a group that we can look at the DNA, and that woman is basically you can trace that DNA through all of us. That's science. Now, will that ever change? I don't know. Maybe we'll come up with something, more important than DNA. But that's where we are right now. So that is what I do want us to look at is, well, we don't have to take anything I'm saying as the truth. I'm not a geneticist. I'm not an anthropologist. Let's look at what they say. But if we accept that, or even just play with it for a minute, what implications does it have on the way we think
about
and
each
how
other,
we be with each other, or how we be together?
Yeah, that's great. I think part of the question when we asked you before our meeting today about what in the world is askew, we've really addressed this pretty thoroughly already, which is this idea of racial classifications, maybe like instantly becoming obsolete because they didn't exist in the first place. And there's a real opportunity to look at humanity using other types of classification systems or taxonomy, including one people, one planet, one home. And that's what I think there's something really warm and inherently loving about that. And, if you really live your life from there, then you get a life that's entirely different and allows for certainly different challenges, but allows for an alleviation of so many of the troubles that we're presently experiencing.
I'm moved by what you just said, because there's a possibility there. And it's really important because, again, if we go back to 1600s and look at what was going on, we could see maybe that was needed to do whatever we did then. Because I'm not saying one group of people did it, because we're all humans. We did it. And we have that whole thinking sometimes that, I have to have more and give you less, or whatever we were thinking, because we're human beings. And I deem myself to be a part of all of it. But not about blame or anything, but what is possible now? I was reading about racial classifications, and the one thing that I read about was, well, where do we go from here? Because one of the justifications was, well, when we do the census, we have to do it a certain way because we decide who gets money and all of that. And then I'm like, well, I wonder if the way we're doing it, I wonder who's getting most of the money right now. So it hasn't really exactly worked to be more just, it doesn't seem, but maybe that's just my point of view. Mm-hmm. But the real question, Fred, that I would ask, because I don't have all the answers, is what is possible now for humanity?
Right. And again, I think that is really the question. And I think that's all we have left to do, right? That's it. That's what we have, is like live into the world of what really is possible for humanity. And we get to choose multiple different possible directions, right? We get to choose from multiple different possible choices here. And there's an opportunity to look at maybe grace, justice, and power for all people as a possible direction to move towards, or to really look at the world as a great place for all, or really look at life belonging, like all of our lives belonging to the communities that we live in. And, once we use those places to start from, those places to land in and start from, my goodness, the world takes on a whole different, dare I say, a whole different color into the future, like a whole different level of I don't want to use the word possibility, but like there's a whole different level of outcomes that then become available that are otherwise unimaginable.
I just love what you said. To hear you say these things, I'm like, okay, this is a starting point. In this conversation with scientists and biologists and anthropologists and geneticists has been going on at least, since the 50s. And then certainly when we had Newsweek talk about mitochondrial DNA Eve, a mitochondrial DNA Eve in 1988, that rocked my whole world. But to keep exploring and to keep creating, I think about this, and I think you'll like this, Fred. So we've been in conversations that were created by people who are no longer on the planet, and we still keep saying them. So we could create if we saw the need, because the thing is, when we look at what harm has been done by having a hierarchy of racial classifications, what harm has been done, and not necessarily intentionally. But even if we do that, if we look at science says it's not true. It's not, they say that, like that's what the anthropologists say. You can go to the physical anthropologist articles in 2019. You can look and find this information everywhere. But such great harm and separation was done in whatever we, and I'm going to put we in this because we're planetary humans, right? Whatever we thought we needed to do then, but this is today. And is it obsolete now? Is it used, and can it be used in its present form to do great good or not? And we'll decide that as planetary humans. I am really confident that this is an important conversation. And I want to say, Fred, that John Lewis, I keep coming back to him, is so great. I never thought I would. He saw something when he says, we are one people from one family. We all live in the same house. And I have one other thing that I want to say before we close, but that's why I came here. And I'm so happy, not about being right or being controversial or non-controversial, but I honor you today for your commitment to humanity, Fred, to have people explore, not to be right about something, but to explore different conversations. Maybe that we agree or disagree, which really doesn't matter.
It really
does. That we be in communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I accept that. I acknowledge that and accept that with full grace and really full gratitude. It's coming from you. It means a ton, Rita. So I truly appreciate it. Thank you. And it's really a pleasure. I get to, like I tell my listeners sometimes, this job is so much fun because I get to pick and choose all these super interesting people and then get to meet them. And it's just like, and they call that work. It's like, okay. Let's just don't tell anybody that this isn't very hard for me. So really, really great, Rita. So listen, I guess it is time. I think it says, like we talked about beforehand, we could talk and should talk and will talk again and for hours into the future. But for the time of this podcast, it's time to start thinking about, tapering and winding down. And one of the things that, we could look at is, like, what does the near future look like? And what, in a world that gets what it is that we're talking about today, how about if you throw out some, little ribbons, little, bubbles, little, maybe even dreams, if not even declarations of what this world in your imagination could unfold to look like as a result of taking these things and, undoing the stuff that's obsolete, didn't exist in the first place, and applying some things that we actually know that were true, which is, one people, one family, one house.
So thank you. So it could look like when you look at my driver's license or all those things, it won't ask for a racial classification. It would just be so great to be an American citizen. And I think we could get the greatest minds who are geneticists and anthropologists and people who create conversations, that we could create something that is representative of humanity and honors all human beings. I think we can start with the physical anthropologist and their position statement, but something that connects us. Because I think that when we did the subgroups or the groups in the 1600s, it was meant to be efficient and to, in a way, to divide, to categorize, to classify. That was a classical period. So I just think that there won't be a census question to ask anyone about race. I think that day is coming. I don't know when, but everybody always says you want to see it in your lifetime. It doesn't even matter if it's in my lifetime, because my life belongs to the community anyway. But I think that is something that we will see. And then, that whole thing, there's a reason I'm a lawyer, that we will move toward a more just society. I always think, and I have to add this about, labels. When I look and think about, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And even when you look at that,
that's a great point.
I'm not a man, I'm a woman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But is it big enough to include, remember how my teacher in the class that created this mission and this vision And this banner was like, it has to be big enough to include all people on the planet. And you we don't think like that.
Yeah.
And so it could be big enough to include everyone.
Right.
And I think we'll do that because I think we don't even know we want that, but we want that.
It's fabulous. Fabulous, 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 fabulous. Thank you, Rita. It's really been a deep honor, actually amazing honor and pleasure to speak with you today. I know my world has shifted as a direct result of this conversation, and I'm pretty certain that my listeners will echo that sentiment completely. So the next question to ask you is, say my listeners are interested in, well, how can I hang on to Rita Williams? Like, what if I want to write her? Or what if I want to learn from her? Or what if I want to follow her? Or what if I want to read what she's written or some of her decisions that have been made as a result of her work? How would someone reach out to you, Rita? Or how would someone be able to follow you if they were interested?
I can give you my email address. I think that would be right today. That would be an easy way to reach out to me.
Go ahead.
It's a little long. It's called R as in Rita, R.T. Williams at Williams, WILLIAMS, and percent, R.T. Williams at Williams and ASSOC.com. R.T. Williams at WilliamsandAssoc.com. And I'll send you, Fred, I'll send you that.
Right. It'll be on the cover of this podcast for sure. And it's really fabulous. And is there anything in closing, Rita, anything about this conversation or something maybe we didn't touch you was hoping to, or something you said or I said that you want to clarify? Or if not, that's fine. Is there anything in closing you'd like to pass along to myself and my listeners?
Yes, Fred. I mean, I just love this. This has been so much fun for me, right? So the last thing that I want people to know is I'm also a spoken word artist. And I learned to do poetry when I was in the 7th grade. And that's one of the reasons I became a lawyer, because when I was in my dad's church and speaking, people would give me a standing ovation when I would say this poem over and over and over. Now, that's not the poem I'm going to say, but I do want to do a little bit of Rumi, because I would like to close there. Can I do that?
Of course.
And this comes from Rumi, and it's out of the poem A Great Wagon. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase, each other, doesn't make any sense. The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep. It was great being here. Thank you for your fabulous, expanded listening. Thank you for inviting me into your world.
Of course. Thank you for being here. Thank you, listeners, for enjoying this as even a fraction as much as I did, because it was just wonderful. And I really just welcome you to share this with other folks and take what we're saying here and give it a try, give it a whirl. And there might be something here that really can move you or move others. And it's really, really just amazing. So Rita, my pleasure. Thanks for being here, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Have a great rest of the day, great rest of the week. And until we talk again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning in today with my conversation with Rita Williams. I really absolutely love this conversation with her today. Don't you think it was just great about how humble she is? She really doesn't know about how large she is and the impact she's making in the world. And it's precisely this humility that leads to her greatness. She doesn't know the impact she's making, and she's always striving to make such a large impact. And in that process is making an even larger impact than she can know. It's just wonderful to know and to have interviewed Rita Williams for you today. So maybe when you were listening to the show, you thought of a person or maybe a group of people who would really benefit from hearing this episode. Go ahead and reach out to them now. Invite them to listen and invite them to subscribe to the Welcome to Humanity podcast. And while you're at it, I'd like to ask a favor of you that is small, but it's really huge in terms of its impact. First, could you just take a moment to subscribe to this podcast on your podcast player? That way, I can promise you the latest episodes as they become available. And secondly, if you appreciate at all what we're doing here, if it's moving you in any way, just take a few minutes to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It turns out that subscribes and reviews are the best ways that we can reach listeners and even more listeners with the Welcome to Humanity podcast. So if these conversations are moving you in a big way, please pay it forward by subscribing and leaving a review. I would truly be extremely grateful for that level of support. And if what you want to do is catch up with past episodes, head on over to welcometohumanity.net/podcast. So until next time, this is Dr. Fred, and it has been another wonderful edition of the Welcome to Humanity podcast. Thank you for listening. Welcome to Humanity.